They told me I wasn't family. In front of strangers at my own father's resort, my stepmother sneered that I could sleep in my car like I was nothing, like my last name meant less than dirt under her heels. But that lobby humiliation wasn't the end. It was the spark. Because the truth. My father secretly owned the resort, and in those papers he'd hidden from me, my name was already written into the company's future. That betrayal nearly broke me until it became the reason I rose. Like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't yet. Let's begin. I still remember how the air smelled when I pulled into Sapphire Bay Resort's circular driveway that morning. Salt and hibiscus, like the Gulf itself, was holding its breath for something important. I was nervous, but hopeful. My dad's 50th birthday was supposed to be a milestone not just for him, but for all of us. The first big trip we'd taken since Mom died 5 years ago. I told myself this was our chance to bridge the silence, to feel like a family again, instead of 3 factions orbiting around one man's wallet. I'd driven 3 hours from Tampa, my little hatchback packed with too many suitcases, more eager than I wanted to admit. I'd even taken vacation days from work, the ones I'd been hoarding for a marketing conference. This trip was supposed to matter. The resort lobby was the kind of place you see in glossy brochures, but assume is photoshopped marble floors polished until they reflected chandeliers like pools of liquid light. Ocean glimpses framed by floor-to-ceiling glass, and staff dressed in crisp uniforms that made the place feel like the stage for someone else's life. For a moment, standing there with my duffel slung across one shoulder, I felt like maybe I belonged in that picture. Maybe we all did. I spotted them near the reception desk. My father, Robert Marlowe, stood stiff in a tailored linen shirt, his posture betraying nerves even as he tried to look every bit the successful man Patricia wanted him to be. My stepmother clung to his arm like an ornament. Patricia, with her shellacked hair and diamond-tipped manicure, her entire presence screaming of careful construction. Beside her, Olivia spun in a slow circle, arms outstretched as if auditioning for a spotlight. 19 and in full possession of the kind of arrogance only someone shielded by wealth and a mother's ambition can manage. "Daddy, this place is absolutely perfect," she squealed, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "Can you believe we're staying here for a whole week?" Other guests turned, some annoyed, others amused. Patricia's lips curled into a satisfied smile. "Robert, you've outdone yourself. This is exactly the kind of place the Wilson Marlowe family should be vacationing." I froze at the hyphenated name, that knife she always twisted. I'd never taken the Wilson edition when Dad remarried, and Patricia never missed a chance to point it out, as though my refusal was rebellion, rather than loyalty to my mother's memory. My name was Marlowe, full stop. But here in the cathedral-like lobby, my correction would only sound small. I bit my tongue. The receptionist greeted them with professional cheer, tapping at her keyboard as Dad handed over his credit card. 4 nights in our ocean view suite, she confirmed. For 4 guests, my father began. For 3, Patricia cut in smoothly, not even glancing at me. Just the 3 of us in the suite. I thought I'd misheard. Heat shot up my neck, burning into my cheeks as the receptionist's eyes flicked to me, then quickly back to her screen. "This wasn't part of the plan," I said, stepping forward, voice tighter than I wanted. "Dad, you told me." Patricia's sigh sliced through my words. "Jessica, we discussed this. The suite only has 2 bedrooms. Olivia needs her privacy, and your father and I certainly need ours." My father shifted uncomfortably, eyes fixed on the marble floor. Olivia smirked, examining her manicure. "We never discussed this." I managed humiliation crushing the air from my lungs. "Where exactly am I supposed to stay?" Patricia's shrug was as elegant as it was dismissive. "The resort is fully booked for summer. We thought you could make other arrangements. Perhaps a budget hotel in town." Or she tilted her head, feigning concern. "Doesn't your car have reclining seats?" My stomach dropped. The receptionist's mask cracked for a fraction of a second, sympathy flashing across her face before professionalism slammed back into place. "My car," I repeated, certain I was hallucinating. "You expect me to sleep in my car after driving 3 hours to be here?" "Don't be so dramatic," Patricia said, her tone dripping with condescension. This is exactly the kind of attitude that makes family gatherings so difficult. Always making everything about you. For a heartbeat, I thought Dad might speak. His lips parted, but he closed them again, silent as stone. That silence hit harder than Patricia's cruelty. Something inside me splintered. I wanted to scream to demand he see me, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, the lobby seemed to tilt around me, the marble, the chandeliers, the murmurs of other guests. My humiliation wasn't private. It was public, woven into the air of a place where strangers would carry the story of the girl who wasn't welcome in her own family's suite. Before I could decide whether to walk out or collapse, a man appeared at my side. Tall, composed, his dark suit cut to perfection. His presence shifted the energy immediately, his voice calm but authoritative. "Is everything all right here?" Patricia's scowl transformed into a saccharine smile. "Oh, everything's fine. Just a small family misunderstanding." But his eyes weren't on her. They were on me. Sharp, searching, as if he already knew the truth beneath the gloss. His name tag caught the light, Marcus Chen, Operations Manager. "If there's a problem with your reservation," he said evenly, "I'd be happy to assist." I opened my mouth, closed it, then forced myself to speak through the knot in my throat. "It seems I don't actually have a place to stay." My voice trembled, but the words carried weight. "I'll just figure something out." Something flickered in his expression. Recognition, and then he said the words that froze Patricia's triumphant smile in place. "Miss Marlowe," he said, turning to me with quiet deference, "we've been expecting you." And just like that, the ground shifted beneath all of us. Marcus didn't argue with Patricia or look to my father for permission. He simply inclined his head toward a quiet hallway and said, "This way," Miss Marlowe, like the decision had already been made. I followed, hugging my bag to my chest, the click of my flats swallowed by the lobby's soft music. We passed a velvet rope and a subdued security station. Marcus flashed a key card at an unmarked elevator, the kind guests don't notice unless they know to look. The doors opened with a hush, reflecting my stunned face back at me in polished steel. Inside, the panel wasn't buttons. It was a glossy touchscreen. Marcus tapped a code that didn't exist on the public elevators, and the car rose like a held breath. "I don't understand," I said, finally, the words rasping. "I'm not important." He glanced at me, unreadable. "You're a Marlowe." The elevator opened directly into a suite that didn't look like a room so much as a promise wall-to-wall ocean, a horizon that felt close enough to cup in your hands, light pouring through glass so clean it vanished. The air was perfumed with white lilies and salt. There were fresh flowers, a marble-topped kitchen with fruit stacked in symmetrical piles, a dining table set like a magazine spread, and a terrace that went on forever. It was stunning, elegant, restrained, the kind of luxury that whispers. "Welcome to the owner's penthouse," Marcus said. The word owner landed like a dropped anchor. I turned to him. "Owner?" He nodded once, careful. "Yes, ma'am. The penthouse is reserved for the Marlowe family when they're on property." My mouth went dry. "The Marlowe family. Your father's company. Marlowe Hospitality Group acquired Sapphire Bay 3 years ago." He said it like he assumed I knew. "This is standard protocol." The room tilted, not physically, but somewhere under my ribs. 3 years. My voice scraped. He didn't tell me." Marcus's composure softened a fraction. "I apologize. I assumed—" "No," I said, forcing air into my lungs. "It's not you. 3 years. While I was sending my dad enthusiastic emails about boutique hotel marketing trends and begging him to let me help on anything at all, he'd bought a resort and said nothing. My mother used to say the truth is rarely a thunderclap. It's drip, drip, drip until one day you're soaked. I walked to the glass and touched it, the ocean cold even through pain and air. Why wouldn't he tell me? I asked the horizon. The only answer was the tug of grief I thought I had already paid for in full. Elizabeth Marlowe had died in an ICU room that smelled like antiseptic and cardigans, and then a year later Dad remarried a woman who preferred our family history kept in storage. Photos of my mother had been boxed under the pretense of fresh starts. My last name had become an inconvenience. Now this, my father's secret life with our name on the sign. Erasing isn't a single act. It's a practice. Marcus cleared his throat softly. There are materials for you on the desk. I turned. On a streamlined oak writing table sat a leather folio embossed with the resort's logo. A neat stack of binders stood beside it, tabbed and labeled in a hand I didn't recognize. On top, a note in sharp black ink, for Miss Marlowe's review. My fingers shook as I opened the folio. Inside were quarterly reports, occupancy charts, ADR graphs, and a crisp briefing memo. Social plus local partnerships proposals for Q3 tests. The cover page listed my name, full name under internal recipient. Another binder. Talent pipeline. Junior exec development. J. Marlowe mentorship track draft. My throat tightened. He hadn't just bought a resort. He'd folded my future into it on paper while leaving me to guess in real life. I flipped a tab and found an org chart with a dotted line box labeled Director Brand and Guest Experience Proposed J. Marlowe. There it was, the ghost of a conversation we never had. The professionalism of it felt obscene against the ache rising through my sternum. Miss Marlowe, Marcus said gently, "Can I get you anything, coffee, water?" I shook my head. I didn't trust my voice. The penthouse was silent except for the soft hiss of the air system and the distant, ceaseless hush of waves. In the kitchen, a tray waited with sparkling water bottles and a ceramic bowl of tiny dark chocolates, precisely the brand I'd loved since college. Someone had thought about my preferences. Someone had prepared for me. Not my father. Someone. The lilies on the console were stargazers, my mother's favorite. The memory hit hard. Mom's wrists dusted with pollen after arranging grocery store flowers like they were orchids, humming Patsy Cline in a kitchen too small for the dreams she tucked into me. "You belong wherever you decide to stand, Jess," she'd tell me, tapping my forehead lightly, as if marking me with permission. I swallowed the burn behind my eyes and picked up the memo labeled Brand Positioning Hospitality with a Human Memory. The executive summary read like an echo of her. Center every decision on the person in front of you. Anticipate needs. Treat staff as the heartbeat, not a line item. A line in the margin, handwritten, stabbed me in the chest. EM is right. This is the differentiator. EM. Elizabeth Marlowe. My knees loosened. I sat at the desk because it seemed wrong to collapse on the velvet sofa in a room that still felt theoretical. Marcus stood a respectful distance away, hands clasped, waiting without hovering. "Did my father tell you I was coming?" I asked. "Your arrival was noted on the VIP calendar," he said carefully. "We were prepared to host you." Host me. The word jammed like a burr. Patricia had told a stranger I could sleep in my car, while a man I had never met had a key that opened a door my father never mentioned. The humiliation of the lobby replayed in cruel clarity the way Dad's silence multiplied Patricia's words, turning her needle into a blade. Only now it was worse. All that cruelty had unfolded in a building with our name in its paperwork. I flipped another binder. Under a tab labeled Community, a list of partnerships with local artisans, eco-charter captains, youth culinary programs. I could see how to spin it, amplify it, turn this resort into a story people wanted to tell. The realization came with a flash of anger so clean it felt like oxygen. He didn't think I was ready, or he didn't want the fight. The elevator chimed faintly, a sound I felt more than heard, and I realized I was standing again, my palms pressed flat on the desk, as if I could steady the entire room through force of will. In the glass, the gulf kept breathing, unbothered by families and secrets. My phone buzzed on the table, jittering against the leather folio. A text from my father. "Where are you? Patricia wants lunch." For a heartbeat, I just stared at the words. Something inside me, Something patient and obedient sat down and folded its hands. Another part of me stood up. I looked at Marcus. "Can you connect me with your department heads later today?" I asked. The question surprised both of us, and then I felt the rightness of it settle like a weight in my palm. Marcus didn't smile, but his eyes warmed. Of course. I typed my reply to Dad without pausing to rehearse. "Can't make lunch. I have work to do." Then I set the phone face down and breathed deep, letting the lilies and the ocean and the quiet confirm what I already knew. No more silence. I barely slept that first night in the penthouse. The ocean outside was calm, steady, but my thoughts churned like a storm tide. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Patricia's smile in the lobby, and my father's silence replayed frame by frame. But when morning came, the knock at my door wasn't Marcus. It was a voice I hadn't heard in years. Jessica Marlowe. I opened the door and nearly dropped the coffee mug in my hand. Sofia Rodriguez stood there, her hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, a clipboard tucked under her arm. I hadn't seen her since high school when we'd spent summers building sandcastles at Clearwater Beach and swearing we'd never let life pull us apart. And yet life had done exactly that. "Soph." My throat tightened. She grinned, stepping forward to hug me, clipboard and all. "You're actually here. I didn't believe it when I saw your name on the guest list." "You work here?" I asked, pulling back. "Events coordinator," she said proudly. "And sometimes chaos wrangler, which usually means dealing with Patricia." At the sound of that name, my stomach clenched. Sophia noticed and lowered her voice. "I'm guessing she hasn't gotten any easier since we were teenagers." "She told me to sleep in my car," I said flatly. Sophia's eyes flashed with something between anger and disgust. "Of course she did. You know she treats this place like it's hers, right? Everyone here knows. She drops your dad's name, bullies, the staff demands upgrades, free spa treatments, bottles of wine delivered at midnight. And she always makes sure we all know that you're not the real family." Her words, not mine. I gripped the edge of the counter. "So she knows about the ownership. Knows Jess. She weaponizes it. She uses it like a whip. Half the staff are terrified of her." The words cut sharper than I expected. My father hadn't just hidden the truth from me, he'd let Patricia use it as a crown. Sophia touched my arm. "But the staff, they don't like her. They see the way she treats you. You'd be surprised how many people here would stand behind you if you asked." The idea jolted me. I'd felt so alone. But maybe that was Patricia's trick, make me believe I had no allies when they were standing all around. Later that morning, Marcus introduced me to a man in a trim gray suit who radiated calm competence. "Miss Marlowe," he said, bowing his head slightly. "Leo Kim, financial advisor for Marlowe Hospitality Group. Your father asked me to make myself available to you during your stay." I blinked. "Available for what?" Leo smiled in that infuriatingly polite way of people who know more than they're allowed to say. "Perhaps it's easier if I show you." He opened a leather portfolio and slid a document across the table. It was a corporate organizational chart updated just a month ago. My father's name was at the top as CEO, but my eyes dropped immediately to a box at the bottom right shaded pale blue. Proposed Jessica Marlowe, Director Brand and Guest Experience. My stomach flipped. It wasn't just the position. It was the word proposed. Leo tapped the page. "Your father has consistently indicated his intent for you to join the company in an executive role. In fact, several documents already list you as a future stakeholder." Future stakeholder. My voice cracked. "Yes," he said gently. "You're named in succession planning materials. If anything were to happen to your father, the expectation is that you would assume significant responsibilities. In short, Miss Marlowe, you're not just part of the family. You're part of the company." I sat back dizzy. For years, I'd been begging for scraps, small projects advice, even acknowledgement that my marketing degree was worth something. And the whole time Patricia had been whispering in his ear, erasing me from dinners, holidays, even conversations about our family's legacy. Yet here was proof he'd imagined me in the company. He'd written me in. He'd just never told me. Why, I whispered. Why wouldn't he tell me Leo's expression didn't change, but his eyes flickered with pity? That's a question only your father can answer. Sophia was waiting when I stepped out of the meeting, and one look at my face was enough. What did you find out? That it wasn't an oversight. I said, my voice shaking. It wasn't ignorance. He deliberately kept me out. Sophia's jaw tightened. That sounds like Patricia's hand. She used it to control the narrative, I said, feeling the words catch fire inside me. She let me believe I was nothing. And my dad, he let her. Sophia nodded grimly. So what are you going to do? I stared out the tall glass windows where the ocean stretched blue and endless. The same ocean my mother had once sat beside her hand, warm on mine, telling me I was made for more. For the first time in years, I felt that truth rise in me like a tide I couldn't stop. I'm not sitting this one out, I said. Before I could explain further, Marcus appeared, his phone in hand. Miss Marlowe, he said, his tone careful. The board of directors is meeting tomorrow morning. Your name is on the docket. You're expected to attend. Sophia's eyebrows shot up. The board? Marcus nodded. Yes. It seems the time for silence has passed. My pulse hammered. I thought of Patricia's smirk, my father's silence, the staff's whispered stories of cruelty. Tomorrow morning I wouldn't just be the daughter told to sleep in her car. I'd be the Marlowe in the room. And I intended to make them remember it. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I spread the binders across the wide oak desk in the penthouse, a fortress of paper and ink lit by a single lamp. The documents smelled faintly of toner and leather, but when I opened them, they pulsed with life charts that revealed patterns, numbers that whispered truths, memos with margins that begged for vision. I wasn't just reading reports. I was mapping a story, one my father had left unfinished. Coffee cooled beside me as the hours blurred. I scribbled notes in the margins, booking system outdated. Staff complaints equals lost revenue. Local artisans not leveraged. Lost opportunity for brand loyalty. Events team undervalued. Turnover risk. Each observation was like a stepping stone across the river of Patricia's lies. She'd convinced me I didn't belong. But here in the quiet of a penthouse overlooking the Gulf, the evidence screamed the opposite. I wasn't only capable. I was necessary. At some point, I leaned back and rubbed my eyes. Fatigue threatened, but my mother's voice cut through it, clear as surf in my memory. You belong wherever you decide to stand, Jess. I saw her as if she were still there, Elizabeth Marlowe in her garden gloves, hair escaping her ponytail, dirt smudged on her cheek as she taught me how to coax life out of dry soil. She'd said those words when I was 14, trembling before a school debate. I hadn't wanted to get up from my seat, terrified of being laughed at. She had crouched in front of me, her palms warm on my knees, and whispered that sentence until it rooted itself inside me. Now, as midnight turned to 2, then 4, I clung to it like a rope. Patricia's poison had buried it for years, but tonight I dug it out and polished it until it gleamed. By morning, I was ready. The boardroom was on the top floor of the resort's executive wing, its glass walls curved to frame the horizon. 12 men and women in tailored suits sat around a table so long it looked like it had been carved from a single tree. They turned as I entered, some curious, some skeptical. At the head sat Robert Marlowe, my father, his linen shirt replaced with a navy blazer, his expression unreadable. Marcus stood discreetly by the wall, his presence a quiet anchor. I sat down halfway down the table, my binder balanced in front of me, my heart pounding so hard I wondered if the microphones in the ceiling could pick it up. The meeting began with formalities, financial overviews, occupancy forecasts, a report on capital improvements. I listened, waiting until the chair turned to me. Miss Marlowe, I understand you've reviewed the guest experience reports. A murmur went around the table. My father shifted in his seat, clearly caught off guard. But the chair continued. We'd like to hear your observations. Every eye turned to me. My throat went dry, but I opened the binder and began. Thank you. Yes, I've spent the last 12 hours studying the reports, and I've also spoken with staff on the ground. I flipped to a page marked with my scrawled notes. There's a consistent pattern of complaints around the booking system. It's outdated, clunky, and forces staff to spend more time apologizing for glitches than providing service. Guests notice. In hospitality, frustration during booking poisons the entire stay before it begins. Several heads nodded. One executive scribbled notes. Encouraged, I pressed on. Second, we're missing an opportunity with local partnerships. Guests don't just want a room. They want a story to tell when they leave. This resort is surrounded by world-class artisans, ecotourism captains, and culinary talent. Right now, we barely highlight them. That's money left on the table, and worse, it's a failure to connect with the community that sustains us. More nods. I glanced up, found Marcus's steady gaze, and drew strength from it. And finally, I said, my voice firmer, the event staff. They're treated like disposable labor, but they're the pulse of guest experience. Underpaying and undervaluing them leads to turnover, which sabotages long-term service quality. We don't just need to keep staff, we need to invest in them. Training, recognition, advancement. Silence held for a moment. Then the room erupted into quiet applause. Executives smiled, murmuring approval. One leaned toward another, whispering, "She's right. We've been ignoring that for too long." I looked at my father. His eyes were wide, caught between pride and shock, as though he was seeing me for the first time. I felt taller in my chair, stronger, like I'd stepped into a space that had been carved for me all along. Then the doors slammed open. Patricia swept in her heels, cracking against the polished floor, her perfume invading the sterile air of spreadsheets and strategy. Olivia trailed behind her arms, crossed eyes darting nervously. What is she doing here? Patricia's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. She pointed at me like I was a stain on the tablecloth. This is a private meeting. She doesn't belong. The room froze. Executives exchanged uneasy glances. My father half rose from his chair, but Patricia didn't wait. She is not qualified to be here, Patricia barked, marching to the head of the table. She is not family, not real family. You cannot possibly let her sit in this room as if she has a voice. My hands clenched under the table, but I forced myself to meet her glare with calm. My pulse hammered, but inside me my mother's words rang louder. You belong wherever you decide to stand. I was standing, and I wasn't moving. The chair cleared his throat, caught between diplomacy and discomfort. Mrs. Marlowe. Miss Jessica is on the docket. I don't care what docket she's on, Patricia snapped. Remove her, now. The executives shifted, unease thickening. My father looked stricken, torn between the woman beside him and the daughter in front of him. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small under her rage. I felt the weight of the room shift toward me, even if no one dared admit it out loud. I straightened my binder, folded my hands, and waited. Because Patricia wasn't just angry. She was terrified. Patricia's fury filled the boardroom like smoke, suffocating, impossible to ignore. Her voice ricocheted off the glass walls, sharper than the gull cries outside. She is not qualified. She spat, each word landing like a slap. She's a glorified receptionist with a marketing degree she's never even used. Do you think she understands capital structures, occupancy rates, debt covenants? She's nothing but a liability, and you're all fools if you pretend otherwise. Olivia, seated beside her mother, crossed her arms with adolescent certainty. Yeah, she said, lifting her chin. She doesn't know anything about real business. Mom's right. She doesn't belong here. The sting of her words cut deeper than I expected. She was only 19, barely more than a girl, yet already so practiced at mimicking Patricia's venom. I drew in a steady breath, holding the silence like armor. If I'd learned anything in 28 years, it was that fury thrives on reaction. Across the table, the executives shifted uncomfortably. Their polished pens stilled their expressions, careful masks. The chair coughed into his hand, clearly wishing the floor would open and swallow us all. Patricia whirled toward my father. Robert, say something. End this farce before she embarrasses us all. For a long moment, he didn't move. My father, the man who'd stayed silent while Patricia told me to sleep in my car, now sat frozen in a boardroom that carried his name. My heart pounded. I braced myself for the silence I knew too well. But then he moved. Slowly, deliberately, Robert Marlowe stood. His chair scraped against the floor loud as a gavel. His eyes, blue and tired, met mine across the length of the table. And for the first time in years, he didn't look away. "Jessica," he said, his voice gravelly but steady. "You will take a role in this company." The words landed like thunder. A dozen executives leaned back, some hiding smiles of approval. Others stunned into stillness. Patricia blinked as though she'd been slapped. "Excuse me?" Robert straightened his blazer, finding his authority in increments. "You heard me. Jessica is my daughter. She has the education, the insight, and the drive to carry this company forward. I should have included her years ago." "That changes now." Patricia's jaw dropped. Color rose high on her cheekbones, 2 angry flags. "After everything I've done for you, for this family, you betray me like this, in front of the board, betray you." My father's voice rose, surprising even him. "Patricia, this isn't about you. It's about what's right. Jessica has earned her place. You've spent years convincing me otherwise, and I let you. But I won't anymore." The air thickened. Patricia's fury sharpened into a blade. She turned on him, eyes flashing with venom. "So this is your grand plan. Elevate your little princess, humiliate me, humiliate us while you sit there pretending you're still the man I married. You're pathetic, Robert. Absolutely pathetic." Olivia gasped. "Mom." "Quiet." Patricia hissed at her daughter, never breaking her glare at my father. "You're siding with her, with the woman who's done nothing but drag us down. I built this image, Robert. I gave you respect in this community, and now you're throwing me aside for her." Her hand shot out toward me, nails glinting under the recessed lights as if pointing could reduce me to ash. I let the silence sit. Then I leaned forward, folding my hands neatly over the binder in front of me, my voice calm, measured, unhurried. "Patricia," I said softly, "respect is earned, and the staff here already know the truth." Her head snapped toward me. "What truth?" "The truth," I said, letting my eyes sweep the table, ensuring every executive felt the weight of it. "That when we arrived yesterday, you suggested I should sleep in my car, at our own resort, under the Marlowe name." The room went still, the kind of stillness that precedes a storm. Executives exchanged startled looks. One woman's mouth fell open. Another man muttered under his breath, "Unbelievable." Patricia's face drained of color, then flushed red, then blanched again, flickering through disbelief and fury like a broken signal. "That's a lie," she snapped, too fast, too sharp. But her voice quivered, and in that quiver every person in the room heard the truth. I sat back calm as the ocean beyond the glass. "Ask the receptionist. Ask anyone in the lobby yesterday morning. They heard you. They saw you." My father's face crumpled, horror dawning in his eyes. The executive stared at Patricia with a mix of disgust and pity. Olivia shifted uncomfortably, her bravado faltering, her gaze darting between me and her mother like she was seeing cracks in the armor for the first time. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "Staff already know how you treat me." I continued, still measured. "What they're realizing now is that you treat the Marlowe legacy the same way, like it's disposable, like it's yours to manipulate." Patricia's mouth opened, then closed, words abandoning her for the first time. The boardroom pulsed with silence, and I let it hang there, a guillotine suspended in the air, daring anyone to deny it. Because in that moment the narrative shifted. Patricia was no longer the gatekeeper. She was the scandal. Patricia's denial in the boardroom had landed with a thud. No one bought it, and for the first time I watched her lose ground instead of seizing it. Executives avoided her eyes, staff whispered in hallways, and even my father seemed to shrink from her. But the biggest shift wasn't in the boardroom. It was in Olivia. That afternoon I found her on the terrace, scrolling her phone with unusual silence. Her shoulders, normally thrown back in smug confidence, were hunched. She looked smaller, younger. "Everything okay?" I asked carefully. She rolled her eyes, but her voice lacked bite. I don't know what to think anymore. It wasn't much, but it was a crack. And cracks spread. The next day, those cracks widened. I was walking through the lobby when a guest stormed past the concierge desk, his face blotchy red. "This wine is vinegar," he barked, holding up a glass like a weapon. The young server, no older than 19, trembled, her tray rattling. "Sir, I can—" "Don't bother," he sneered. "You people don't know service. I'll be leaving a review so scathing it'll ruin this resort." The staff's panic was palpable. They'd been taught to absorb cruelty to protect the brand. But the brand was me, and I wasn't letting that stand. I stepped forward. "Sir, I'm Jessica Marlowe," I said, calm but firm. "I'm sorry for your disappointment. The bottle will be replaced and the cost of your meal will be removed. But I will not allow you to insult my staff." He blinked, caught off guard. Murmurs rippled through the lobby. The staff stood taller. The man's anger deflated under my steady gaze. He muttered something about leaving and stalked off, abandoned glass still trembling in his hand. The server exhaled shakily. "Thank you, Miss Marlowe." "No," I said, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Thank you. You're the heartbeat of this place." Word traveled fast. By evening, staff I hadn't even met nodded at me in hallways, respect shining where dismissal used to linger. Patricia's power had been fear. Mine was dignity. And dignity spreads faster than fear. Later at dinner, another crisis flared. A wealthy guest leaned too close to a Jamaican server, his voice dripping disdain. "No offense, but maybe if you people spoke proper English, my order wouldn't be messed up." The room stiffened. Patrons shifted uncomfortably. The server's face flushed, but he said nothing. I rose from my chair. "Sir," I said, each syllable sharp as glass, "that remark is unacceptable. You'll treat our staff with respect or you'll leave this dining room." Silence. The man sputtered. "Who are you to—" "I'm the Marlowe whose name is on the deed," I cut in. "And I won't have racism under my roof." Gasps. A few claps. The guest turned purple and fled. The server's eyes shimmered. "Thank you, Miss Marlowe," he whispered. The dignity spread again. But while I was winning the staff, Olivia was spinning out. That night she sauntered up to the bar, glossy lips pursed, fake ID clutched in her manicured hand. "Martini extra dirty," she ordered, voice pitched like she'd practiced in the mirror. The bartender hesitated, glancing at the ID, then at me across the room. Olivia smirked. "Just make it. My stepdad owns this place." I walked over before the bartender had to choose between his job and the law. "Olivia," I said softly, "let's go." She glared. "You can't tell me what to do." "Maybe not," I said steady, "but I can protect the staff from being forced into a bad decision." "Come on." Her bravado cracked. She slammed the ID on the bar and stormed out, heels snapping. I followed her to the terrace, the ocean black glass under the moonlight. "Why do you always ruin everything?" she hissed. "I didn't ruin anything," I said, gentler than I felt. "I kept you from making a scene that would have embarrassed you more than it embarrassed anyone else." Her chin quivered. "Mom says you're trying to steal everything from us." I swallowed. "Olivia, I don't want to steal anything. I just want what's mine and what's right. You don't have to believe me, but someday you'll see the difference." For the first time, her eyes softened. The sneer melted. She looked like the kid she still was. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Barely audible, but real. It wasn't a reconciliation, but it was a beginning. A fragile thread where there'd only been knives. But Patricia wasn't finished. The next morning, Olivia knocked on my door, nervous energy buzzing through her frame. "Mom wants us to go on the sailing excursion together," she said quickly. "She said it'd be bonding." Every instinct screamed trap. We walked to the docks, sun-blazing gulls shrieking overhead. The boats bobbed in neat rows. Staff bustled, loading coolers, adjusting sails. Patricia stood by one boat, waving with exaggerated cheer. "Girls," she called, "this one's for you." Something was wrong. Too few staff, no safety briefing, no itinerary board. I froze. "This isn't the excursion boat," I said sharply. Olivia frowned. Mom said, "Your mom set you up." I cut in, grabbing her arm. "This is a private charter. You'd have been stranded or worse while she told everyone you ran off." Olivia's face drained of color. She wouldn't. She would," I said grimly. "And she just did." Patricia's smile faltered on the dock as she realized I'd caught her game. I pulled Olivia back from the boat, steady and certain. Not today. And for the first time, Olivia looked at her mother not with devotion, but with doubt. The cracks were widening, and Patricia knew it. It happened 3 days later in the kind of silence that's louder than shouting. We were gathered in the executive lounge, me, my father, Patricia, and Olivia. The Gulf glowed gold through the windows, but no one was looking at the water. Patricia sat perched like a queen, her pearls immaculate, her eyes daring anyone to challenge her. My father sat across from her shoulders, heavy gaze clouded, and Olivia clutched her phone like a weapon. "Mom," she said, her voice trembling but sharp. "Stop lying." Patricia turned, smile plastered on. "Olivia, darling, this isn't the time." "Stop." Olivia's voice cracked. "I know what you did." She thrust the phone out. The screen glowed with messages. Patricia's messages. Instructions to lure Olivia onto the wrong boat. Promises of teaching Jessica her place. Lines so cruel they made my stomach twist even though I'd already guessed them. Patricia's painted smile faltered. "You don't understand. I understand perfectly," Olivia snapped. "You wanted to humiliate me just to hurt her. You put me in danger. Me, your own daughter." The words sliced through the room like lightning. My father flinched. For the first time, I saw the certainty drain from Patricia's face, replaced by something brittle, something human. "Olivia, sweetheart. I was protecting you," she stammered. "Jessica twists everything. You can't trust." "Stop gaslighting me." Olivia's voice broke, tears spilling. "I saw the texts. I lived what you tried to do. You made me lie for you, hate her for you. And I'm done. I don't want to be your pawn anymore." The silence that followed was cavernous. Patricia's facade, so carefully crafted over years, cracked down the middle. She looked at Olivia as if she were a stranger, then turned to my father, searching for rescue. But he didn't move. He just stared, stunned, as if the veil he'd lived under had finally been ripped away. I reached out gently, taking Olivia's shaking hand. She didn't pull away. Instead, she squeezed, clinging like someone reaching for the surface after drowning. For the first time, it wasn't us against each other. It was us together. Later, after Patricia stormed out of the lounge in a cloud of rage and perfume, Olivia and I sat on the terrace, the salt wind tangling our hair. "I hated you," she admitted, staring at the horizon. "Not because of who you are, but because Mom needed me to. If I didn't, she acted like I was betraying her." My chest ached. "You were a kid. She built her world on loyalty tests. That's not your fault." Her eyes flicked to mine, raw with something like regret. "I don't want to be like her. I don't want to grow up cruel." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Then don't. You get to choose who you are, Olivia. You always have." She nodded, wiping her cheeks, and for the first time her smile looked real, not practiced, not smug. Real. That night I embraced what I had already started to become. I met with department heads, drafted proposals, listened more than I spoke. Staff leaned in, eager, offering solutions instead of complaints. Ideas flowed, loyalty programs centered on storytelling, guest packages featuring local artisans, team recognition ceremonies. I didn't just fit into the strategy, I shaped it. For once I wasn't clawing for a seat. I was building the table. Meanwhile, Patricia paced the edges of the resort like a storm no one wanted to acknowledge. She snapped at staff, cornered my father with pleas and threats, tried to pull Olivia back into her orbit. But Olivia avoided her, clinging to me like a shadow. And my father, though still hesitant, had begun to look at Patricia differently, like he was finally seeing the strings she'd been pulling. It all came to a head in a boardroom much smaller than the first. Just my father, a handful of executives, Patricia and me. Patricia leaned forward, voice sweetened with venom. "Robert, you can't possibly be serious, stripping me of privileges, after everything I've done for this family. For your image?" "You mean my humiliation," my father said quietly. His eyes for once didn't waver. "I let you convince me to sideline my daughter. I let you weaponize this company's name for your own ego. That ends today." Her smile cracked. "Robert," he lifted a hand, "effective immediately, your corporate privileges are revoked. No more free suites, no more executive accounts, no more influence. You are not an officer of this company. You never were." Patricia shot to her feet. "You ungrateful coward!" Her voice rose to a shriek. "Do you think you can cut me out like trash? Do you think the board will side with her over me? You'll regret this, both of you." I stayed seated calm as the sea beyond the glass. Olivia's texts had shattered her lies. My father's declaration had stripped her crown, and her fury now was all she had left. But as she stormed from the room, heels cracking against the marble, I felt the air change. Patricia wasn't finished. Her rage wasn't gone. It was simmering, coiling, promising consequences we couldn't yet see. And I knew with a clarity as sharp as broken glass that the real reckoning was still to come. 1 year later, I sat in my office overlooking Biscayne Bay, the skyline of Miami, shimmering in the late afternoon sun. My nameplate on the desk read, "Jessica Marlowe, Chief Marketing Officer." Sometimes I still caught myself staring at those words, waiting for them to blur into a dream. But they didn't. They were real. They were mine. The walls were covered with framed campaigns. I'd helped launch ads that told stories, not just sold rooms. We'd doubled guest loyalty signups in 6 months by highlighting local partnerships. Resorts once described as luxurious but cold were now praised for hospitality with heart. And the staff, the staff stood taller than ever, no longer afraid to speak up, no longer treated as invisible. I had reclaimed my voice in this company, but more than that, I'd given them theirs. Olivia stopped by my office most mornings before her shift, her junior management badge clipped neatly to her blazer. The transformation was slow but steady. Gone was the girl who smirked behind Patricia's shoulder, parroting cruelty. In her place was a young woman learning to listen to work, to be accountable. Last week, she'd handled a guest complaint on her own, smoothing over a booking error with patience I wouldn't have believed possible a year ago. When she told me about it, her face glowed with pride, and I'd felt something warm unfurl in my chest. Not rivalry, not resentment. Something closer to family. She still stumbled. Sometimes her old arrogance peeked through, especially when stress got to her. But she was learning. And more importantly, she wanted to learn. Sometimes I think about Mom, she confessed once over iced coffees on a breezy afternoon. About how much I believed her. "I feel so stupid." I shook my head. "You were young. Manipulation feels like love until you learn the difference. What matters is that you're learning now." She'd smiled, small but real. "Thanks, Jess, for not giving up on me." It struck me then that maybe this was my mother's legacy too. Not just to fight for myself, but to reach back and pull someone else forward. My father was still rebuilding. His hair had gone grayer in the past year, his posture more stooped as though the weight of his regrets pressed down daily. But he was trying. He came to every strategy meeting prepared now, not distracted or deferential. He asked for my opinion and listened when I gave it. At dinner once he'd cleared his throat and said I should have defended you that day. In the lobby. In so many lobbies, really. "I don't know if you'll ever forgive me." I'd set down my fork, meeting his weary eyes. "Forgiveness isn't a transaction, Dad. It's a practice. I don't know if I'm there yet." but I see you trying. That matters." He'd nodded, tears threatening but not falling, and for once that was enough. Patricia, meanwhile, had spun out of our orbit entirely. The divorce papers were signed 6 months ago. Her access to company accounts revoked her influence. Gutted. Rumors swirled about her, trying to latch onto another wealthy family in Naples, but her name had become synonymous with scandal. Staff she once terrorized no longer whispered about her. They laughed. She had lost not just her power, but her audience. Her manipulations had finally collapsed under their own weight. Sometimes I caught myself wondering if she thought about me, the girl she tried to banish to the back seat of a car. If she realized that in trying to erase me, she'd sharpened me instead. Because here in my office, high above the bay, I understood something I hadn't before. That humiliation was the hinge on which everything turned. Being told to sleep in my car at my own family's resort had felt like the ultimate proof of my unworthiness. But in reality, it was the spark. The moment I decided no more silence, no more waiting for permission. That's the thing about betrayal. It cuts you, but it also carves you open. And sometimes in the raw wound you find the strength you'd buried all along. 1 year later, I didn't just have a title. I had clarity. I wasn't the outsider anymore. I wasn't the inconvenient daughter, the shadow of Patricia's perfect picture. I was the woman who walked into a boardroom and refused to leave, the one who turned whispers into applause. And I knew deep down that my mother had been right all along. I belong wherever I decide to stand. The gulf shimmered outside my window, and I thought of that morning in the lobby, the receptionist's pity, Patricia's smirk, my father's silence. And I smiled, not bitter, not vengeful, triumphant, because sometimes the moments designed to break you are the very ones that set you free. I leaned back in my chair, let the sunlight wash over me, and whispered the words that had carried me through every storm since. Sometimes the car seat they force you into is the throne you rise from. And with that, Jessica's journey comes full circle. What began as humiliation became the fire that forged her strength. If this story struck a chord with you, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your reactions in the comments below. We read every single one. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of betrayal, resilience, and justice. Thank you for listening. This has been a story from Revenge Served Cold. We'll see you next time.